Hey, it's Josh coming to you from the RPM shop. We've had a few customers come to us over the course of the last month or so since we released these reels, inquiring about a tutorial on how to tear these things down and put them back together, keep them in good working order. So what we're going to do is we're going to tear down this M1X, this trigger reel, from basically the way that it sits here all the way down, and then we're going to put it right back together. So the first thing you're going to want to do is when you start tearing one of these down is go ahead and take the reel hood off, and it just threads off. You're going to set that off to the side. Then you're going to take the pickup pin housing off, and so what you do is you just hold the handle here, and then this is going to go counterclockwise, and it'll just back right off. So you take the pickup pin housing off. If you ever have to replace that, that's all you have to do is just twist that thing off, set it off to the side, put on another one, and you're back off to the races. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the handle off. So you take a flat bladed screwdriver and just simply back this handle bolt out, back it out all the way, set it off to the side. The handle will now fall off, and we'll set that over next to these other parts and pieces. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this 7mm nut off the back of the T-handle. So you've got a socket, 7mm, and you're going to back it out, and it'll come right off. And again, we're just going to set all this stuff on a clean surface so that we don't lose it. The T-handle will now come off, and there's two nylon washers. They're yellow in color, and then there's a little bearing in between those two washers. Set those all off to the side, and now this rear case will come off. So it's just going to slide right off the back end, and again we'll set that off to the side. There's another set of those nylon washers and bearings on the inside of the housing. We're going to set those over here. Then there's the main shaft spring, so we'll take that out, and then this whole shaft will come out, and we can set it down. And then you've got the main pickup pin housing spring that's on the front side of the spool. And we'll set that over here. Then what we've got is, for all intents and purposes, you've just got the internal guts of the reel. So you've got the pinion gear, which is the long gear going across, and then you've got the main gear here down in the center. For the sake of video, I've loosened these screws up on these saddles already. They're going to be pretty tight, and you just need to take your time and work them out, but just back these screws out. And there's 4 of them, so 2 on each saddle. You're just going to back these out with a Phillips head screw. The saddle's going to come off, and then you're going to do the exact same thing to the other side. So you're going to back these screws out. Again, they're going to be pretty tight, so don't get frustrated. Make sure you got the right size Phillips head screwdriver and back those suckers out. They're tight for a reason. We don't want them vibrating loose, when you're out on the boat. Once those saddles are off, we're going to take the anti-reverse system here out. And again, that's another Phillips head screw. You're going to take that out. It's the brass axle of the anti-reverse, and then you've also got the anti-reverse plate plus another one of those fancy nylon washers. We'll set that over here and get it out of the way. Then this pinion gear along with these brass bushings will come out. So there's one brass bushing, another brass bushing, and then this washer, the anti-reverse washer and spring. So there's quite a few parts and pieces to this internal working, and then the main drive gear will just come out. If you need to replace this, this is a great time to do it. Same thing with the pinion gear. You break it all the way down. There is inside here, there's a brass bushing that has to be there. That's what this main drive gear rides on and keeps it all centered up. So make sure that brass bushing is in there. Once you've established and cleaned all the parts and pieces, lubed it up, done whatever, replaced any parts and pieces, then we're going to go back through the reassembly. You don't ever, realistically, you're not ever going to have to tear it down any further than what we've done right here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start to do the reassembly. So we take the pinion gear first. You're going to slide the brass bushing on one side, and then you're going to remember that you've got your anti-reverse washer, which is this flat piece here, and if you can see right here, there's a little bend in the bottom. That's going to go down, and it's also going to face into this gear. So the way that it's going to go on is like this, and then it's going to go on that pinion gear like that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put the spring, the anti-reverse spring in, and there's a hole right up here on that washer, and that's where that spring goes into, is just like that. So then we'll put the brass bushing that fell off on this side, put this one back on, and then we're going to place it right back into the housing, into those 2 grooves. So it's going to set in there just like this. So once everything's centered up and placed back in, Then we're going to put the anti-reverse mechanism back in. Now this is, there's a top and a bottom to this anti-reverse plate. The longer piece, which is right here, goes up, and this shorter piece goes down. The long piece is going to go underneath this spring here, and it's actually going to slide, and I'll bring this up so you can see. This is super important that you get this put in right, or it's not going to work correctly. So if you can see, there's the washer and the spring, and then you've got the bent side of the anti-reverse washer here, and it's going to slide in here just like this. That's how it has to go in order for it to work correctly. Then we're going to rotate this down, and then it's going to come down inside this housing into its groove like that. Then what we're going to do is, and I'll show you this once I get this screw tightened up just so it doesn't fall out. We're going to tighten this screw back down, and then you're going to see right through here, you've got to have that top anti-reverse plate below that spring. That's what holds it in. Now, once we've got this situated the way that it is, I just let it go just a little bit and it slid over. Then we can put the saddles back on, or we can put the main drive gear in. I generally like to put the saddles on. So again, for sake of video, I'm just going to tighten these down just a little bit. So we'll tighten these back down, and then we're going to rotate it over, tighten this one, put that saddle back on, tighten these down, and again, they're going to be tight. Don't get frustrated with it. Just take your time and make sure that they seat all the way down and that there's no binding in here. And then we're going to take this main drive gear and we're going to drop it back down into that hole, into the center of the housing itself. So that's how this whole thing goes back together, and it's got to look just like this or it's not going to work correctly. Then what we're going to do is we're going to reinstall the main shaft, and if you notice right here it's got two flat sides. Well, so does this this main gear on the inside. It's flat on two sides as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your finger here to hold it in place, and then you're going to take this main drive shaft and you're going to center it up. It's going to come through, and then you're just going to have to walk it around until it falls through, and then it'll go flush like that. So then we can push it back out just a little bit. We're going to grab our spring, the pickup pin housing spring. We're going to center it up, and then we're going to put the pickup pin housing on. That will hold the front together. So that's basically the way that it sets, and then we can set this down. Make sure that your main drive gear is... See, and it popped up just a little bit, but you can just work it around and then get it, make sure that all of the gearing is together and that the teeth are lined up. Once you're in this situation where you've got the pickup pin housings installed, you've got the shaft sticking up, then we're going to put the main shaft spring back on. So that goes on right against that main drive gear. Then we've got to remember that you've got your washer, so your nylon washer first, then a bearing, then another nylon washer to protect that bearing. Now we're ready to put the rear case, this case back on. So we're going to hold everything together, because if you just pick it up, it's all just going to fall right back through. So you've got to hold it and support it from the bottom. Then we're going to put this case back on like this, and then you'll notice that there's, on the top of it where the drag system is, there's a groove here. Make sure that it seats correctly. Then we put our T-handle back on, and if you'll notice here, there's a flat side to this T-handle. There's also a flat side to the back of this case. This handle has to come through like this. It'll set in. If you try and do it backwards, it's not going to work. So you've just got to rotate it around. Again, holding the front of the pickup pin housing. Now you've got the main shaft stud sticking out. And again, nylon washer, bearing, nylon washer, and then we're going to put this nylock nut back on. Now we recommend you put a little bit of blue Loctite on, especially if you've loosened this nut once or twice. Nylock, they don't have a tendency to hold as well after they've been removed a few times. Another thing is that when you tighten this thing back up, you want to make sure that that main drive shaft goes flush with the back end of this nut. That gives you maximum hold, and it'll hold together as you've got the friction of the reel going around and around. Now, we can go ahead and put the handle back on. Right-handed, left-handed, makes no difference. Just go ahead and thread her in there. We're going to tighten this thing back up. And then you're going to want to make sure that the line isn't stuck underneath this pickup pin housing so that it'll free spool around. And then we're going to set it up, drive this line through the front of the reel hood. Make sure that it's not bound up on those threads. Tighten this back down. And again, being that I didn't tighten those screws all the way, it may or may not pick up. It sure picked up that way, and then you're back off to the races. For other tutorials on the M1, any questions that you have with the nitro, make sure you look us up online, rpmbowfishing.com.